Okay, hi, I'm Siri Grell, and it is amazing to be here in Toronto as part of the amazing World City Festival. We are here at the beautiful Roy Thompson Hall in downtown Toronto with a lively crowd of three. We're excited to be here. So I'm really excited to be joined by Claudette and Ahmed today, and we're going to have a really, I think, important conversation about breaking down barriers and creating new opportunities. Um, that is a tough job in the best of times. This is not the best of times. I think we can all agree. So I wanted to start off by talking about COVID a little bit. The global pandemic has upended our economies, our communities, and it has accentuated, I think, the gaps between those who have and those who have not. So I wanted to start by asking you, when it comes to creating opportunities, do you see this moment, Claudette, as a moment of crisis or a moment of opportunity?
I think it's both. It's certainly a crisis, and it's impacting people, around the world. But I have also seen people take the crisis and take the difficult time and turn it into innovation, turn it into creativity and new offerings. I just spoke about something last week where there was a robot hackathon that was supposed to happen here in Toronto. And, with COVID, the decision was made, we can't proceed. And the team got back together and said, well, why don't we make it virtual? And instead of making it a Toronto hackathon, why don't we open it up to the world? 30 countries, 300 people later, are now hacking on service robotics because they didn't take COVID as something was a crisis, but said, hey, how do we make this an opportunity?
Yeah.
So I think there's so many examples like that, whether it's organizations, whether it's community groups, they're really looking at what more, what else, what next.
And that's kind of been your whole story, right? Sort of stronger when opposed. The more people throw at you, the more you throw out good ideas. Do you feel like this is a time where important things are happening?
Absolutely. I always felt that when we started our project with House, that necessity is the mother of all innovation. We knew prior to this that people were underestimating innovation, creativity, and most importantly, imagination. We never really bred that culture in Canada to be really over the top in our design thinking and our imagination on what's next before what's next.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Mike Tyson's famous line of everybody has a plan until we get punched in the face. Well, we've been punched in the face repeatedly because of this, economic tsunami that COVID's created. So for us, we always wanted to propel people's thinking and ask themselves to fix things before, that's check engine light comes on. The check engine light's not on no more. We're actually stuck in the middle of the highway on the 401. So it's like, now I was telling all my friends that, remember I've been telling you for the last 3 years, come up with a lot of ideas? We need them now.
We need them.
Yeah,
exactly.
we need them, yeah.
Remember, a few months ago in the pandemic, a friend of mine texted me. It was one of the days where, all the bad news is coming at you. And she said, I feel like the world's ending. And I said, I feel like the world is fighting back. We are seeing that there are power structures in place around the world, here in Toronto, in cities around the world, that have not been working for so many communities, for Black communities, for women, for new Canadians, for the refugee population. How are you trying to seize this moment where people are realizing that the old ways were not working for a lot of people? How are you trying to usurp those power structures right now? Claudette, do you see that happening?
I see it happening in a remarkable way. And it's unfortunate that it took, the murder of an individual, in
Lots of
addition,
individuals.
to this global pandemic. And a pandemic is really an epidemic that goes across different, international borders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see this as a pandemic in a pandemic. And so we're dealing with multiple layers of difficulty and adversity. And so when I see companies come forward and say, hey, listen, we got to put a stop to this. Or I see folks say, we're going to go on a listening tour and we're going to hear from everybody in our organization on what's really going on. What's that stuff under the waterline? What's that stuff we saw the iceberg, the tip,
Yeah.
but what's all the other things that are underneath that? And we're seeing not just the listening, which is very important, but the action. We're measuring folks on action and we're seeing the call to action. We've got global organizations putting their signature on the dotted line to say, we're going to make some change. We have people putting statistics out or goals, stretch targets to say, here's what success is going to look like in 2022, 2025. That's really remarkable as well, too. But at the end of the day, I think it's what's the change really going to be? Time is going to be the only thing that tells us, was this performative? Was it truly systemic? Were we getting at those systemic matters and issues? And I think there's going to be a few companies and a few organizations that can stand the test of time. But we're seeing things like Black North here in Toronto being set up for all of Canada. We have CELAR, the Coalition of Innovation Leaders Against Racism. We have the Black Opportunity Fund. We have so many organizations focused on BIPOC, the Black, the Indigenous, the people of color. It's really casting a wider net. And I think the proof is going to be how many folks get jobs, how many folks get meaningful jobs, how many folks get educated, how many folks are now having $100 million exits because they founded something remarkable during this period of time. Time is going to be the test. That's the only way we're going to know if it really, really stood.
So I think, I imagine the World City audience is filled with people who want to understand that racism, discrimination, lack of opportunity is also a global pandemic, and are looking for ways to sort of push through this moment to affect change. So Ahmed, how do you make sure it's not performative? When you're in the room with people who are like totally on it now, want to create change, how do you make sure that they're going to deliver something measurable?
I think anybody who knows me and has been in the room with me never forgets our approach to things, because even when we were the smallest thing in the room and we're knocking on their door as if we were Oliver Twist begging for porridge, right? Please, sir, right? We knew we had something because we reflected a diverse ecosystem. The under 30 population globally is more homogeneous as one collective than everything else we've ever seen in this world. So we knew we didn't only speak for people of color, we spoke for everybody. People who were going through the ringers, coming out of college with no jobs, people who did everything right and still couldn't get their first look, people who were living up to expectations of their parents but not their own. There's so much doubt in the system, or people who were never allowed to go to school because they couldn't afford it, or couldn't finish because they couldn't afford it. There's so many ways that people have been failed by a traditional system that was archaic for over 100 years. It's the same system. So what we knew when we first started House was we came to the conclusion the first day that the system is broken. That's our mantra. We live by that. So when we come to people who want to put our logo next to theirs or wrap it in a beer can and sell it to, it doesn't work for us. We knew what authenticity looks like, what brand identity looks like, and anybody we've done things with or any partners that we've chose to work with have directly had to hire our talent, and make separate relationships that House didn't benefit from at all. We wanted to be opening those doors, or at least getting young people. My co-founder Lamar always says, our job is to prepare them as best as possible to get to the door. It's up to them to close. It's up to them to go through that door. And I think the brands before didn't understand that the definition of a true partnership isn't just writing a check and expecting us to do all the work. I think now what you're starting to see is more of this new energy of, what can we do?
Yeah.
What can we help with? How can we grow? So now it's almost a co-creation, co-collaboration model.
Yeah. You guys aren't here together by accident. You guys are actually working on this together.
Absolutely.
Claudette, you're a senior leader at TD, which is one of Canada's largest financial institutions. You recently partnered with Ahmed on a project called Black House. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and what you're trying to achieve through that work?
Yeah. So in a prior life, we partnered with House. And I think when we started, we thought, hey, how are we going to help out House? And when Ahmed's team, 19-year-olds, 24-year-olds, 28-year-olds came forward, and they were in brainstorming sessions with us at this multinational organization, we realized, hold on, they're bringing strength to the table that we never even envisioned. And so when I joined TD in April of 2020, I thought, wow, isn't this a great opportunity to continue this? And one of the things that I saw at TD was this intentionality, this focus. I remember being at a meeting and someone says, well, where does everybody live? And I thought, why are they asking that question? They're like, well, how do we reach out to them? It's during COVID. Who's living remote? Who's living on their own? What are some of the things that we can do, whether they're in your line or not, to make sure that those people are okay? Mm-hmm. There was this focus on humans that I'd never seen before. And I thought, my gosh, what a connection to now make something real. So spoke to people internally like Tim Clark and Colleen Ward and Danielle Dakotas. And everybody was like,
Rizwan.
yes, Brizon Califon, we did not have to sell it. Everyone was like, I'm there. You could barely finish your sentence, and everyone was like, let's do this. So we think about the talent pipeline and now tapping into that relationship with House. We think about our creative and things we can do to reach out to all demographics, and those things we're going to partner with House. We're talking about networking and sessions where you're almost doing a reverse mentoring, right? So things that where we think we have some opportunity to improve, House can come and be that strength. And so we're really excited about the partnership and about what this can bring to life, and that focus on BIPOC. And Ahmed touched on it. House is for everyone. Black House is really focused on the BIPOC community, because I think you see that, or you hear the analogy, which house is burning? There's a house that's on fire right now. We're going to give it the energy, but we still care about all the other houses as well too.
I mean, I like the idea of reverse mentoring. We were talking the other day, and I was saying that one of the things that bothers me sometimes about programs that are meant to create opportunities is that it focuses on, oh, well, if we just mentor the women or the BIPOC community, we just make them better, then they can get the jobs. I like the idea of reverse mentoring, because it's like, no, we're good. The pipeline is here. It's you.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to me? What's your intention with this partnership? What are you trying to do through TD?
I mean, in general, everything that we do is, we're not into the victim blaming. I've been told in the past to apply for government grants, but they weren't the ones the traditional white organizations would be allowed to get. But I was always told apply for at-risk, systemic, marginalized, radicalized. But we are young kids that sometimes don't fit those criteria.
Right.
We're just looking for opportunity. And I think for the first time, I've worked with a lot of good brands. I've done over 100 partnerships with 100 corporations. What makes the TD partnership for me was unique is they didn't have an agenda. Usually the agenda is not presented sometimes at the beginning, but somewhere in there you'll see that the thing morphed into something that you didn't anticipate. So with them, they kept saying it to me, and I kept getting calls from one particular person, Daniela, who would always say, what could we do for you guys? What do you need? What's your 5 places that are burning? How can we help you get those? What's solved now? What can we solve next year? And I'm like, wait, they're already talking a multi-year partnership. They're telling me what, and it changed my energy, because before we had to always balance what brands need, what the community needs, what everybody needs, and we were always in the middle. But this one, I felt like it's a partner seeing the same problem we're seeing, and then they're trying to help me get to the finish line. So what makes this one special for us is, I think for me, I've been a have not longer than I've been a have. So I more relate to young talent coming through Canada, because I know looking into the banking system that there is a banking while black experience, even if you have money. I've been in all shoes and shapes and forms, and being somebody that, the banks have missed traditionally as a know your customer scenario, these young kids at House, some of them are 25-year-old retirees because they've done so well, but nobody has seen the opportunity in young people until it's too late. And nobody invests in young people until it's too late. So I think what's important is to keep talent in Canada by showing them that we care, and we care early, not when you're relevant and we want to use you to boost our own economic development or our own tourism or whatever. But if you catch them earlier, then they are homegrown talent, because they'll stay at home. So I think this partnership definitely utilizes the best of all of that. It's how do we keep the best talent here? How do we support it? Because every time that we've traveled around the world for House, or to study other incubators, other accelerators, on tour with the weekend and seeing all the people who come to the shows, the top tickets, the top VIPs around the world are Canadians. They're running the biggest global national institutions. And then you ask all of them, why did you leave? There was no home for us. So I wanted to make something that didn't have an age demo, a color demo, that was gender neutral, everything possible to make it inclusive, like it was your living room, because some people just never get to meet the person that they're destined to meet. Nobody's really focusing on those connections. And if we bring brands to young talent, talent to young brands, cool people just to be friends, we're creating our own alumni. And you see it in all these bougie clubs, but you just don't see luxury non-for-profits doing things like that. And that's kind of what we're interested in doing, is bringing everybody home and celebrating Canada. Because right now, I think what I've seen is everybody's scared to lead because nobody wants to be a meme. Nobody wants to do the wrong thing and then become the thing that people, circulate. So for TD to bet on us and for us to be supported the way we have, it's a great step in the right direction, because now it puts Bay Street on notice that other brands, like the other ones that I won't say their names, have to support the community, and more importantly, actually go into these community centers, these projects, find these trailblazing leaders, walk their shoes, live with them. When we first met TD, yes, the deal we started working on maybe in Q2, but we've known about our relationship for a year. So they knew my struggles, they knew where I was trying to go. And I think brands need to listen more.
Yeah.
And if they listen more, when they do co-collaborate, it would be a better end result for everybody.
So you've been a big deal at a lot of different places. You talked about TD just now, and you said that you didn't have to make the case, right? They were there. They were already there. When people are thinking about how to affect change, how to change these power structures, what's your advice on that? Do you sort of go where the water leads you, like go to the places that are already ready, or do you try and break down the hardest doors? Like, why do you think that mindset existed in TD, where they were ready, they understood that they needed to tap into this different pocket of talent?
Yeah, I think culture plays a big role in everything we do. And some organization, it's in the DNA, and others it's not. But it doesn't mean that you can't grow it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not possible. And that's why those listening tours that a lot of companies are doing right now, I'm hearing different leaders say, I had no idea. I had no clue. And so there's this thought that there's these, 6 people in a room pulling strings, and this is how they want the world to work. And it's not happening that way.
Right.
There are a lot of people with great intentions who don't actually understand what's happening in the hearts and minds of the people who make the magic happen for their organizations.
Yeah.
And so the listening is pivotal. The action is even more important. And so it's not about saying, hey, I'm going to put somebody in this spot, because you could be the person in the spot, but it's lonely to be the only one.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're the only one, folks will say, well, why? How did they get there? There's many times I'm being interviewed by subordinates, and I'm thinking, why do they have so many questions about my journey?
Right.
And they're trying to validate, like, how did she become who she is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we have to kind of go underneath that waterline and say, what does it take to make a leader? Let's forget all those things, almost like those blind interviews where, you've got this, here's the resume of this person, here's the resume of that person, and you don't know their name. And then you say, well, how do you make decisions? Like, I think there's a lot of, taking away those things that as humans we gravitate to.
Yeah.
I went to this school, so anyone with this school, well, they must be great, right?
Yeah.
Or I grew up with this background, okay, then I have to connect to that. We like sameness. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves. So I say, book a meeting with yourself.
Yeah.
Have a good meeting with yourself and ask, why are the 6 people around me these 6 people around me?
Yeah.
Who do I spend time with? You believe in helping other communities? Tell me 5 people you know from those other communities.
Yeah.
How many people can put their hand up and say,
Absolutely.
you know what, Siri's made a difference in my life?
Yeah.
And if they can't, then you have to say, back to the meeting with yourself, what am I going to do about it? So instead of saying, hey, Canada needs to change and Toronto needs to change and the world needs to change, start with yourself.
Absolutely.
That's my
I remember
advice.
saying that a couple of months ago to somebody, of like, the job of leaders right now is to look at all the structures you have around you, take them apart and rebuild them to make sure that they're not getting in the way of opportunity, that you don't recognize your blind spots and address them. I'm fascinated by this idea of leadership right now, because I agree with you that, everyone's looking for it. I think around the world, people want to be led. They want to be inspired. What do you think is getting in the way of bravery right now?
I think it depends on different markets. I'm one of the fortunate people who was able to travel during COVID and before COVID, right? Before COVID, you would see certain countries tote innovation from an early age. So it's showing up into their curriculums in high schools, middle schools, in the Scandinavian countries, in Germany, in Hong Kong. You see this amazing Japan growth to figure things out and unlearn things and then put it back together. And then in Canada and North America, it's been business as usual to our detriment, but our kids haven't been taking that. When I talk to some of my young kids in their 1920s and I'm asking them, how did they learn machine learning and AI? And they say to me, well, the school system can't catch up to what I want to learn at the speed I want to learn it at. So I watch YouTube and I press 2.5 times the speed. So I'm watching lectures from the global universities, and that's how I'm learning. And that's how I'm exiting my companies at 23. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at these kids and they're on their 3rd venture, and they're millionaires. And I ask myself, well, school needs to become more adaptive to the talent that's going there. Because I always felt like education, I was always a consumer. But the academics don't want you to believe that you're a consumer. They almost feel like this is altruistic system that they're doing you a favor. Well, if it doesn't show up in my bottom line when I pay every semester, it's not really anybody doing me a favor. So as customers, we should be able to have the choice to leverage our capital to choose what we need to buy. And I think right now, what you're starting to see is, young kids who want to dream. And I spoke to Jack Dorsey when he came to House, and he's like, I didn't want to wait 4 years to go to university to find out if this is the program I wanted to be in. So experience learning is kind of what we do at House every day. It's to make you taste something that you might have never thought you would see at that level, hear from somebody who's at the highest level of that individual task, and then let you have the opportunity to say, is this something I want to pursue? As opposed to going through the system and then changing your method or your career later. So I think in Canada now we have to push innovation from high school, middle school. We have to even make sure that there's days that I spend at least one day a week, and most of the founders at House spend at least a day a week just thinking, away from everybody, because our job is to see around the corner. I do 30 days a year, sometimes even 60 at 30-day blocks with no technology, no cell phone, no digital interactions, because it's hard to think of something end to end and have something that's right in front of you. So you could be in Hawaii, but you could know exactly what's going on live traffic in Toronto. You're not attached no more. So I wanted to make sure that I gave myself that time. And I always take the time in July, and then I have my breakthroughs in August. So I always see a direct correlation, and I think we need to start teaching people how to step back.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because you guys are both obviously, STEM advocates, entrepreneurs. You believe in science and technology and the opportunity we can come to through innovation. But how do you balance that, right? Because I think that there's a danger through technology, and we're seeing this with some of what's being the new global powerhouses that are being created, that we can recreate dangerous power structures through technology and innovation as well. So Claudette, how do you balance that of saying, okay, we have to innovate, but we also have to have the context of culture and history?
Yeah.
How do you communicate that in your own workplace?
Yeah, I actually just did a panel on big tech on Friday with Rotman. And we had a good conversation around making sure that there's an ethics applied to everything that we do, that we're actually understanding who we're building for. So when you're a developer, you have personas. So who are you building for?
Mm-hmm.
And having to make sure that you have inclusive technology, so you're building for everyone. You're thinking through, when you have an artificial intelligence kind of engine, is it thinking about somebody in India? Is it thinking about somebody in China? Is it thinking about somebody, Jane and Finch in Toronto? You have to make sure that you're being very inclusive about that approach. From my perspective, when it comes to balance, I think it's about making sure you spend the online and the offline time. And Ahmed touched on it. You can't be connected all the time. If you're connected all the time, you might miss all the things that are happening kind of in your space. So I think there's an important piece that you have to kind of disconnect. They say you're never really off the grid 100%. You might think, hey, I'm off the grid. You're driving in your car and it's sending signals to all the different satellites and things like that. So I think it's important to at least step back and challenge yourself and spend that time, with family. I think that's what COVID has done for a lot of folks, is that you're home. People are baking more. They've added more dimensions to their waistlines, and they're spending time having good conversations. And that you can't forget those stuff. Like pull out a board game every now and again. We did that in my family recently and had a ton of fun. So I think you have to realize that life happens online for sure, but it does happen offline as well too.
Yeah.
I wanted to just touch on that. I also study a lot of the big tech founders and their habits. And majority of them wouldn't dare let their children around the technology they created. So when I see the Facebook Zuckerbergs of the world and the Bill Gates and all these people, even Michelle and Barack Obama, saying that we are very limiting when it comes to our young people getting access to technology, it shows that they already know the detrimental effects. So it's anything like whether you have too much sugar and you get diabetes, it's the same thing. But I think we're still starting to figure out what the mental effects are and what the conditions are going forward of what people are going to experience. But you feel it burn out quicker. for me, especially during COVID, it was already too much for us to take in every day. The death tolls are rising. Then every day, all the systematic failures. And then, in media world, if it bleeds, it leads the news cycle. So you push all the fights and, somebody fought over toilet paper. Then, you go from that to what we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement and the civil unrest with the recession wrapped in that. So you every day you're just sitting there glued to chaos. You're just watching it and you're paralyzed. And then you start to feel like the issues are so big that you can't solve them. So then you step back even more and you become retreating in your own system. So when I found myself going through that slippery slope, you're on your way to a mental breakdown if you don't self-correct or course correct. So now I choose what I want to see based on what I have to do for the day. Because if you're anybody that's a real human and you have any compassion, you bleed for everybody. You're emotional for everybody, and you want to see people, doing well. And when you see all this negativity in the world, you really can't be a dreamer. And I think more than ever right now, we need to have an emphasis on dreams, good dreams, positive dreams, because, everything that folks are going through, we realize big tech can't solve. Everything COVID is right now, we realize big pharma can't solve, right? And now we have to figure out ways to, figure out how people, because when you start to see stuff like, for the first time ever in 100 years, this thing has closed because of COVID. In 100 years, it's never closed. So that means the last 2 world wars with bombs dropping in Europe, this theater was open. Like when you look at things like that, you realize people always knew how to get by. And I think this generation, no matter how much wealth that we've amassed and opportunities that we've amassed, we actually don't know how to live. And I think that's the thing that's so key, because your quality of life, is so important that nobody's going to remember that on your obituary or your tombstone, you took this company from 0 to 0.2% sales growth. It doesn't matter. So what people are going to remember is the good that you've done in this world, the good that other people have done for you, and the good times that you had. And I think that's so important now, to just unplug and do it in a way where, you get to be in touch with your family members, check in on people, because mental health is silent. It's a silent killer. So you don't know who's coping with it and who's not coping with it. So every now and then it's good to just do a heat check. Hey, I'm thinking of you. Hey, are you okay? Is there anything you want to talk about? And they might not, but at least you have the opportunity to help people go through some of the darkest times in our human society right now.
I think that's so important, and I think the heat check is that balance between what are your dreams, what's the aspiration, and what's the reality that you're facing. Yeah. We're talking about World City, we're talking about cities, so I want to do a bit of a heat check with you guys on Toronto. Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in the world. More than half of our population was born outside of Canada. Diversity is our strength, is our city motto, but the reality on the ground is there is racism here. There is disparity of opportunity here. We're seeing people being affected, differently by COVID, depending on where they live, how much money they have, all of those things. Do you feel, balancing the aspiration and the reality, do you feel like Toronto can be a model for how to break through these systems, how to create new opportunities?
Yeah, I certainly do. First of all, disclaimer, I was born in Toronto. So I'm fond of Toronto for many, many different reasons. But I believe our aspirations are so bold. When I think about what we're doing in the innovation sector, when I think about what we're doing, like City of Toronto was one of the first places to have an anti-Black racism group. And I remember the first time I heard it, I said, what's that? Like, I wasn't really clear on what it was. And when they broke it down for me, said, listen, we're going after things that we know there's an issue. We're putting focus on it. We're putting a leader on it. We're putting plans around it. And so I see a lot of the right things happening. Are we 100% there? Is it perfect here? Absolutely not. But how many people have been able to take their family from 0 to 100? How many people have been able to live out that, they came here for the opportunity and it's come to fruition? I think there's so many wonderful things about here, but we have work to be done. And I look at the leadership that we have, and I'm excited about it because I know that their hearts are in the right places, and they're also putting the money behind it, which has been a differentiator. We're seeing investment in communities like never before. At House, the Prime Minister came and announced $221 million for, Black entrepreneurship. That's massive. And so I think we have to look at the actions and the words and then see how things kind of move over time. But I think why that announcement was so remarkable is because it's not something we'd ever seen before. It's not something we'd ever heard before. And now it's to see, well, what happens as a result of this. So certainly work to be done in Toronto, but I think we've got strong leadership. We've got the aspiration. We have to think about why we're seeing the type of behaviors we are right now when it comes to racism. And I think it taps into what Ahmed was saying. We have two types of behavior. When we're healthy and everything is great, we have one type of behavior. And when things are not good and we're not healthy, we have another type of behavior. And I think we're seeing the worst of some people because they don't have the means to take care of their families, because they don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. There's uncertainty, there's a loss of hope, there's despair. And so how do we put our arms around that? Like, so I always try to go to the root cause in tech. If you want to solve something, you can't put a Band-Aid on it. You have to go to the root cause, and then you solve that problem so it doesn't happen again. That's what we need to do. Get out of the firefighting and get in more of the prevention.
Ahmed, we're here to talk about the path forward for opportunity. Right now, having a bit of a refresh this summer, tech-free for a little while, has it given you clarity on what the path forward is when it comes to opening new doors for people?
Absolutely. First, I wanted to go a little bit on that and then tell you a little bit about this, because I do believe Toronto is one of the greatest cities in the world. But I also believe that Toronto's stuck in the 70s, right? Because infrastructure only can happen and change can only happen if those at the top understand what that looks like and can embrace it and also hire the right people to lead them. So that's a microcosm of not just Toronto, but Canada as a whole, because we have the assembly of the parts, but the machine has never really been put together to sell the Canadian story. The Canadian story is talent, education, equality, all of these amazing pieces, but we could be global leaders. We're waiting for Superman to save us every time. And what we've seen in America now is it's not coming. What we've seen in Europe now is they don't have the answers. What we've seen in Asia now is their heads are spinning. Canada is poised to take a lead, but we can't take a lead if we don't know what we're doing and our compass is not solid and we're not all marching to the beat of the same drums, whether it's the prairies, whether it's, east or west, whether it's Canada as a whole in Ontario and Toronto. We're economic generators. We have the sum of parts. We can't wait to just praise that we're selling our companies to an American conglomerate. That doesn't work no more. We have to stay here, stay local, stay leading the human race. And I think right now with what we're doing, we need to have that agenda. And if we keep our heads down the way that China did for almost 2 decades now they're starting to lift their heads up and they see this global dominance. They see their presence everywhere felt. And I think Canada can do it because I've seen Sweden over deliver every time they do something. So I feel like that's our economic metrics, but that's kind of what I wanted to speak on, where Toronto has the parts and we have some of the youngest people in our economy here, right? And globally that are ready to lead. And everybody I've traveled to around the world, every young person used to say to me for 10 years as a resident in the United States, I can't wait to see America. I would say I'm Canadian living in America, and they would say, how's America? Now, if I say I'm Canadian who used to live in America, when can I and how can I get to Canada? So the narrative for young people, they've already made up their minds. So there's this amazing talent locally, and there's this amazing talent internationally that is looking for a home. And we have to make sure that we do whatever is in our power to make that home Canada. By default, if it's Toronto, if not the rest of Canada, we have space for you. So that's kind of for that energy. But to pick up on what you were saying to me about, what's the path forward? The path forward is to only consume positive information and information that's going to enrich you academically. Because before we were telling people automation or pivot or learn how to do something different, or always, don't be that person that gets pushed out the door because you didn't adapt. All of that now is fair game. There's a lot of most of my students at House are working right now. Why? Because they were working and building a successful business model for the new economy. They weren't building it for the old economy. So their business models are literally moving faster than I have. Retail is down. One of my students, Mr. Saturday, just opened a massive retail location at Queen and Ossington. When everybody's shutting down, we're opening up, because there's always been this need for building and understanding audiences and not doing the norm. Because everybody that was doing the norm and getting away with it because the economy was going that way, now the norm is no longer normal, so they're getting slaughtered. Yeah. So you have to come with something more resilient, and you have to be recession-proof, dummy-proof with all your ideas. And I don't think we were doing that before. I think we were doing the A plus B equals C models, and that's not working because big corporations are shutting their doors every day, and these global conglomerates are failing, and some of the mom and pops are doing okay, some aren't. But we have to just, for me, I'm always used to be proud at House what we're doing with what we have in front of us. But now working with people like TD and other organizations, we're trying to give more information to more people faster because let them make that decision. And I think the biggest disparity is having to pay for knowledge. And the more we can get this information out there to people to make wise decisions to impact their families, save their own economy, our economy afterwards as a global, as a taxpayer, you're going to start seeing the growth will happen from that. You'll start to see that individuals will be able to connect the dots. But right now, people are sitting at home, scared, don't have the information, know that every day they press refresh on their banking app, their resources are depleting, and then they're more desperate, like Claudette would say, and they're not going to make the right decisions. So, with us being able to have a progressive government with what the Liberals and Trudeau's team announced, not just for Black House, but even to have the CRB at $2,000 a month, it didn't create panic in our stress thinking. If we still have a way to pay our bills for the people who don't have anything, it helps. Because I know some countries that the government one time dropped off a box of canned food and said, figure it out, and better not be late for their rent. And that was France, right? So as a G8 nation, I think we're gonna do the best out of this, but that's what the government's doing on one front. But we as humans, we as business leaders, we as academic leaders, we have to grow up. And I think nobody had to change because people were making money business as usual. So I think now they've been kicked in the gut, and I would beg anybody who's a great leader to stay and lead the charge. And I would beg that anybody who's not a great leader but has a lot of influence in their organization to step back and maybe let somebody else in their organization lead.
I think that's a great place to stop. I know there's a great number of great leaders watching today. I hope you've seen that there are opportunities to open doors right now. There are people who are doing the work. I want to thank you for showing, our city and the world where the talent is and what we can do with that. And I want to thank you for being here today.
Bet on Canada. Bet on Canada.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Thanks.
coming. Thank you.